I used to think disasters announced themselves with alarms. Sirens, dashboards lit red, logs spitting errors like teeth. That's how it works in my day job. Things fail loudly, and if you're good, you catch the noise before it becomes fire. In marriage, the alarms are softer. A phone set face down on a table, a new laugh in a hallway that used to belong to you, an ashtray collecting lipstick you didn't buy. Those are alarms too. I heard them and told myself it was wind. I'm Ethan, 34, blue team lead in Culver City. I keep a cue sheet for my life like a stage manager. NAS backup, Sundays at 03,000, UPS self-test on the first of the month, HVAC filter at 2 nags, not 1. People call it control. I call it preventative maintenance against chaos. My wife was my wife. Is Lila, 29, an actress orbiting Santa Monica's black box stages. We met under the wooden bones of the pier during a Twilight concert. Her blanket was too small, my backup battery was too big, and both problems canceled each other out. She had that laugh you can feel from another room, the one that makes you glance up and think, "Oh, we're safe here." She said the best part of live performance is when it breaks and everybody breathes together. I said the best part of incident response is when it doesn't break at all. Spark and infrastructure. We mistook that for compatibility. Really, it was an ignition source. We built a life that looked like a coffee commercial from the right angle, 1 bedroom off 14th Street. A balcony, barely big enough for a bistro table where the neighbor's Bougainvillea performed a pink invasion. Sunday mornings at the Main Street Market, sampling tomatoes like wine. Tacos at Gilbert's when a gig hit or a client renewed. A jar of quarters for meters outside rehearsal spaces with broken thermostats and hard chairs. When I told Lila I believed in her, I meant it in the most boring, expensive ways. Headshots, classes with instructors who spoke in verbs, lift rides at midnight, an espresso machine to feed lines at dawn. We shelved kids until after the program, which means the program after the one you just did, because the latter never ends in her world. It only changes name and address. I didn't mind. I like ladders. You can count the rungs. The spring it split, she landed a role that hummed with the promise of being seen by the right eyes. Not a streamer, not a studio, but a new play by a director named Nora who had a haircut that screamed grants and an Instagram that turned tape marks into sacred geometry. 200 seats if you stretch the definition of seat. A projector that behaved like a temperamental cat. A donor board with names that could carry you from a black box into a better room if you smiled in the correct direction. Lila brought the script home like a warm animal. She's messy, she said, meaning the character. Complicated. She does terrible things thinking it's love. You love messy, I said, and complicated. She kissed me on the way to the sink, missed my mouth by a radius called Already Gone. This is the one, E. I can feel it. The first weeks were adorable, rehearsals that ended early, thrift store slip dresses to field a character, a playlist of women whispers singing over synths, sticky notes on our bathroom mirror with verbs, disarm, seduce, betray. Then rehearsals lengthened like shadows. Table work crept into bar closing hours. We're getting a bite became don't wait up. The playlist got louder. The mirror verbs stayed but changed font. One night, our phones lit our faces in bed like aquariums. Her lock screen flashed. "Hey, Raph, we could run lines at mine if you're still up." She flipped the phone face down so fast you could hear the air move. "Who's Raph?" I said, aiming for casual, hitting the lip of a cliff. Raphael, she said. "Producer friend of Nora's. Chill." Chill, I echoed, a parrot learning a word it doesn't like. 2 days later, my Mesh app pinged. New device joined guest network, Raph's phone. The door sensors logged open, close, balcony open, close. 48 minutes of nothing. The apartment smelled like whiskey. I don't drink. LA. Turns living rooms into rehearsal rooms. That's normal. That's what I told myself while my incident response brain underlined the log entries in invisible ink. At 1012 a.m., my friend Milo texted a story from the brig, Lila on someone's shoulder, mouth near an ear that wasn't mine. The lighting was club dark, the angle lazy, the evidence insufficient. My chest did the tight, even clench that precedes either a panic attack or a good plan. I picked the one that pays my rent. I hired a PI named Jocelyn. People picture trench coats and dames. Jocelyn was ex-insurance fraud with a thermos, shoes you can wade in, and a moral code as simple as an auditor's. I won't break laws, plant, or catfish. I'll sit where anyone can sit, shoot what anyone can see, and pull what's public. You decide what story that tells. She sent a link to a shared folder and began filling it with images that didn't need sound. A stairwell kiss caught by a building's doorbell cam that later went into the building's own caught-on-camera montage. A to-go wine bottle balanced on the hood of a car. Lila on our balcony under a bougainvillea thunderhead, smiling into a phone that wasn't pointed at me. Lift receipts lining up with rehearsal calendars like railroad tracks. Calendar blocks titled Workshop Donor Suite. Public filings listing 1 Rafferty Levant, RAF, on the board of a foundation with a gift for making art sound like a spa package. His face spit every roll labeled sponsor. Evidence mishandled is gossip. Evidence handled like a compliance deck is a mirror. The theater's pre-show bumper logo, sponsor slate, the house rules slide with no late seating, lived in a Google Drive folder set to anyone with a link, because of course it did. Their projector was an aging, stubborn thing connected to an even older MacBook. I didn't fish or brute force or plant. I waited for the house manager to say, "Ethan, you're tech. Our loop stutters. Can you help?" I brought brownies and exported a smooth loop and smiled the smile of a man who knows which HDMI adapter belongs to which era. Then I exported another version. I hit a 40-second nested timeline behind the sponsor slate. On spacebar, the logo would bloom, the sponsor glide, attention would settle, and then, without a stutter, the nested reel would play, a calendar square, a timestamp, a doorbell clip posted by the building, a lift receipt, a rooftop selfie with a geotag at 2001 8 a.m., the balcony still from the night she told me she needed to land. No private texts, no nudity, no tabloid flavor. Facts arranged like a hymn. "Why's the file name V3?" the booth kid asked. "Export settings," I said. 3 syllables nobody wants to argue with. The night before opening, Lila slept like the future owes her interest. At breakfast, the script on the table looked like stained glass from all her highlights. "You'll be there?" she asked without looking up. "Wouldn't miss it," I said, and noticed my fork was shaking. The lobby smelled like fresh paint, anxious coffee, and a fig candle. Nora did a slow orbit air kissing cast, calling me our tech whisperer, introducing Raf as our essential friend. Raf's grin belonged in a bathroom with heated floors. A denim jacket blogger pretended not to be a blogger. The house manager thanked me for the loop and pressed a drink ticket into my palm. I slid it back. "Water," I said. "Break a leg," I told Lila at half hour. She grabbed my wrist, squeezed once our code for "we're us," right? And left a bruise you couldn't see. House to half, space bar, logo, sponsor slate. The room settled into that hush that says, "Tell us who we are." 15 seconds in, the projector hiccuped like a cough and kept going. Then the calendar square filled the wall. Workshop Donor Suite. The timestamp surfaced. The doorbell clip arrived, crisp and indifferent. The lift receipt. The rooftop selfie. The balcony still. The noise that rolled through the audience wasn't a gasp. It was 6 intakes of breath-finding harmony. Nora stood so fast her chair fell like punctuation. Raf shrank inside his suit. Lila turned in the wings because the audience had turned, and actors always follow gravity. "Cut!" Nora yelled at a thing that wasn't a scene. House lights slammed to full. The screen went black. The house manager's voice, wrapped in sugar and panic, came over the PA. "We're having a technical issue, please hold." No one held anything. Phones rose like a field of low stars. In row H, I stood because my body needed to know I wasn't hiding. Lila found me. "What did you do?" she said, voice pitched to stay in the geography of us. "What you do when you can't trust the logs," I said. "External audit." "This is my livelihood," she said. It was, I heard myself answer, and hated the accuracy. The board chair's hand landed on my shoulder. "Sir, please come with us," he said in a tone that had purchased rare wine and been obeyed. I let them steer me into a room still smelling of paint. He told me I'd humiliated donors and endangered the community. I told him I'd aired a compliance deck, and that humiliation is what happens when you put a mirror in front of a lie. "We could call the police," he said. "For what?" I said, helping export a QuickTime. He didn't call. Outside, the alley tasted like wet cardboard and hot tar. Jocelyn called. "You lit the fuse?" she asked. "It burned," I said. "And you?" Standing outside it, I said, counting fingers. By morning, the clip had gone where all clean narratives go, everywhere. TikTok set it to music. Reddit annotated it. The comments split the way comments split when nuance gets stripped for speed. I was a hero. I was vindictive. I should have sued quietly. I should have burned it hotter. Reporter sent emails with comment in the subject line like a dare. A podcast wanted me to talk about receipts and relationships. I said nothing to everyone. At 3, Linda called. Tell me what I saw, she said. 40 seconds, I said. Dates and places. Nothing private. I told her, Linda said, voice a nurse's mix of compassion and steel. You can flirt with the fire until your eyebrows vanish. Then it's just heat. She asked if I was okay. I said I would be. She said, good. That night, Lila pounded on the door until it stopped sounding like her hands and started sounding like the building. She slid down the hallway wall and cried a cry that looked like TV crying. I watched through the peephole and did nothing. It felt less like revenge than like physics. She returned 3 days later with a soft knock. Hoodie, bare face, a glass of water held with both hands like whiskey. You destroyed me, she said. You destroyed us, I said. Not clever. Accurate. She lowered her eyes and recited the lines of a world with gates and guards, of rooms where yes belongs to men like Raph. You don't understand, she said. You live in ladders with handrails. You didn't get a yes from me, I said. I got a roof, tuition. Someone who clapped, she said, and there it was, the worst honesty. She had counted on my belief as background hum while she tuned herself to other frequencies. Do you love me, she asked, the last card, the cruel one? Yes, I said, because I don't lie. But I don't respect you, and love without respect is an encrypted drive with no key. She didn't cry. She put her key on the sill like a bad prop and walked out carrying nothing. Alondra, my lawyer, has eyes like scalpels and sentences that don't waste time. We're not here to punish, she said. We're here to document. Lila's attorney responded with performance, humiliation, invasion, injury. Alondra sent back statute numbers, anti-slap case law, no reasonable expectation of privacy, and a single polite note about discovery that included donor suite access logs. They folded inside a week. We split the furniture, the lease, the life. No alimony either way. She wants speed, Alondra said. Good. Money remembers. In the courthouse hallway, Lila stared at the wall like it might hand her a new ending. You win, she said. We both lost, I said. I just stopped pretending. The theater posted about rebuilding trust. Raph's Foundation withdrew its name and rebranded itself into a concept with the word collective in it. Nora sat on a panel called Ethics and Intimacy and said, accountability. So many times it became a metronome. She didn't say Lila. I attended the panel and left with the pleasant feeling of a box ticked. Policies are important. Doors still locked because someone turns the key. Friends bifurcated. Milo brought coffee and silence, the only 2 things you can gift to a man rebuilding. Kara wrote a thoughtful essay-length text about public shaming and how I had fed an algorithm that should starve. I typed and deleted. The algorithm had arrived far earlier than me. I'd just turned on the lights. When Lila came to pack, I left and walked the block 3 times, labeling my steps like a log file. I returned to walls with pale rectangles where posters had been. A pile of scarves was gone from the chair I never sat in because it was always trying on a roll. Lila stood on the balcony, looking through the slit of ocean the buildings allowed. Do you want me to say anything? She asked. Apologize? Perform? Tell me when I became furniture, I said, when the couch was a better scene partner. She laughed once, a mean little blade. When the parts didn't come and the only rooms with yes were owned by men like him. When you kept saying our year and I heard your stability. Marriage makes an hour that isn't a threat to either me or you, I said. Your world has ladders, she said. Mine has gates. So you slept with the guard, I said, and called it art. The flinch was swift, like a fish under the water. She put the key down and left. A cease and desist arrived from a tower in the Palisades on paper that smelled like money. Alondra answered with a letter that could slice hair, anti-slap, public record, theater negligence, discovery. We attached stills with dates. The firm withdrew before the espresso machine I ordered to think. Alondra finished shipping. You didn't have to, she said when I wheeled it in. I did, I said. Machines that keep people alive deserve upgrades. Elise rang my bell on an evening the ocean looked like steel. Leather tote, eyes that had done their crying in another month. I'm Elise, she said, Raph's ex-fiancée. We sat beneath the bougainvillea. She laid out credit card statements, calendar screenshots with red hearts, emails to a studio manager about keys after hours for mentorship. If I send this, I'm bitter, she said. If you send it, it's procedural. I mailed the packet to the Foundation's ethics committee with a timeline attached. 2 weeks later, a press release announced that Raph was stepping away to focus on family matters. The headshot was flattering and old. I felt the click of a lock aligning, nothing more. The decree arrived while I was in a server room, explaining to a PM why disabling MFA was like leaving your front door open with a sign that says, "Please burgle me." The subject line read, "Judgment, interred." I sat on a rolling chair in the cold hum and cried quietly. Not theatrical, not even sad. Relief is a muscle unclenching so slowly you don't notice until you try to use it and it doesn't hurt. Life after that refused to be cinematic. Healing is errands. It's a morning run where you finally notice the crack in the path you've tripped on for months. It's learning the names of the security guards in your building. It's buying a rug that no director would call a choice. It's cooking an omelet that doesn't fall apart and being proud in a way no one can retweet. I saw Lila once behind the counter of a coffee shop on Montana, hair back, apron tied, smile placed. A friend asked if I wanted to go in. I said no. I didn't want a scene. I wanted the ordinary dignity of walking by. She tried to audition, I heard. A stage manager told Milo, who told me that the room went quiet in the wrong way when she walked in. Not because she was bad, because being near her required everyone present to choose a version of the story to live with out loud. She sold makeup on Instagram between quotes about narrative, taught a workshop called Claim Your Story in a community room with mirrors. There's a hustle for every fall. Linda asked to meet. We picked a diner between our lives. She wore lemon print scrubs and a cardigan one wash past its best. She told me about 8-year-old Lila, practicing how to cry in a mirror, waiting for water to appear on her face like applause. I told her that's not how it works, Linda said. Crying is when you're full and it spills. She asked if I hated her daughter. I said no. Hate is a coat you get to put down. This was weather. Promise me you won't get so good at living alone you forget how to live with someone, she said when we stood in the parking lot. I promised to try, which is what honest promises sound like. HR sent an email about support resources and media inquiries. My boss slacked, take time, also hell of a deck. I explained to a PM that just for a week is how breaches introduce themselves. I caught myself saying boundaries more in meetings and laughed alone at the coincidence. The theater announced a new season about redemption, which is a word people say when they want forgiveness without specifying the harm. Nora posted a carousel of actors smiling with the brittle hope you wear right before opening. Good. The world should move forward. The direction with edges is backward. One gray morning after rain, a cardboard box sat on my doormat with my name and Lila's familiar upstrokes. Inside, our Griffith Observatory mug, AD, Astra, a t-shirt from the first show of hers that made me forget to check my watch, and 2 Polaroids, the pier with greasy napkins and dumb grins, Lila on our balcony in my sweater that migrated to her. No note. I held the photos under the hallway's cruel fluorescent light, then slid them in the back of a drawer. Some artifacts deserve a future audience or no audience at all. Present Me recuses himself. There's an hour, 2:13, when my body wakes like an old dog who can't break a habit. One night I stood at the balcony door and put my palm to the glass. The bougainvillea had stopped invading and started surviving, which is a kind of truce. I wrote a letter I didn't send. It said, I wish we had been more boring. It said, if you ever get tender with the truth the way you get tender with applause, some good man will get your best self. Some good man will get your best self. It said, I loved you in 3 versions and lost you in 1. I folded it into the drawer with the Polaroids. Not sending can be a kind of sending. Month later, a couple stood under the theater's new poster, arguing joyfully about aisle versus center. They looked like us once, Spark Plus infrastructure, confident that was enough. I let the ache arrive and leave without asking it to become a sermon. Sometimes the past is a drawing on a fridge you take down because the magnet needs to hold up something you have to pay. At home, I cooked eggs that stayed eggs and ate at the little table the bougainvillea had learned not to colonize. I opened my notes app and wrote 3 lines. You can't audit your way into love. You can audit your way out of a lie. If someone calls consequence cruelty, leave their theater before the bow. I left the windows open. At 03 Theta, the NAS hummed its backup. At 06 Theta, the sprinklers clicked on and off like a patient learning to breathe alone. At 07,030, I laced my shoes and ran the long loop past the Blue Door house and the bench where the skater kid drills ollies at the same minute every morning. I didn't narrate myself. I moved. I sweated. The city felt like a room without an audience. When I came back, the apartment smelled like coffee and soap and a person who had stopped waiting for a knock and started practicing the ordinary, unfilmed work of staying. Sometimes, when the light hits the living room just so, I see the shadow of the projector beam that isn't there anymore, And I think about that night. How 40 seconds said what months of conversations couldn't bear to carry. People online still argue about whether I was cruel. Maybe I was. Maybe I put the mirror in the place she feared most, between her and the applause. But I've learned something the incident reports never taught me. Not all mercies feel gentle. Some mercies are sharp, like a clean cut where infection had spread. You don't thank the blade. You're just grateful to heal. If you want to know what I regret, it's not the 40 seconds, it's the weeks before, the ones where I heard the alarms and turned the volume down because love makes optimists of people who should know better. I regret the time I fed a future I wasn't in. I regret how long it took me to say, out loud, that respect is not a side dish, love is starving without it. But I don't regret leaving the theater the way I did, into an alley that smelled like wet cardboard and hope, without a speech, without a victory lap. Just a man closing a door that led to a room he could no longer survive. And if it makes me the villain in her reruns, fine. I spent long enough playing the quiet extra in someone else's pilot. The exit is the only role that ever fit me better than support. What would you have done? Would you collect your proof and disappear? Or would you put the mirror where the applause lives and let the room see itself? You already know what I chose. I live with it. I sleep. I run. I keep the NAS on schedule. Some alarms still go off. Now, I listen. 2 mornings after the panel about ethics, a padded mailer with no return address slid under my door. The handwriting on the label looked like someone trying to disguise neatness as mess. Inside, a USB stick, cheap, the kind vendors hand out at conferences with their logo scratched off. Taped to it, a yellow sticky note, "If you care about the truth, you'll hear it." S. Every movie has taught me not to plug anonymous drives into anything I love. I used an air-gapped laptop, booted from a clean USB, and scanned the contents with tools I trust more than optimism. One file, an audio recording, 43 minutes, M4A. I put on headphones because the neighbors don't need my life in stereo. Voices, Nora and Raf, and a third soft, precise, the intimacy coordinator who had been credited on the program but barely present in rehearsals. The recording wasn't salacious. It was worse. It was logistics. Budget lines repurposed from safety workshops into donor cultivation, a phrase that tastes like mouthwash and regret. Nora's voice, quick and cool. "We can fold the consent brief into notes. They don't need a separate session." The coordinator pushing back, then reduced to a consultant's invoice number. "Raf, what matters is that the room feels supported. Support is a vibe." Later, Nora again, the quiet steel she reserves for persuading people who want to be persuaded. "We're adults. We all know how this works." The file contained dates, references to email threads, a calendar invite ID. It wasn't illegal. California has complicated consent laws for recordings, but the intimacy coordinator had recorded her own meeting on the advice of a lawyer after being sidelined. She, I guessed, had decided now to share it. I stared at the waveform pulsing gray on my screen and felt anger I hadn't had room for before, the kind that includes grief for everyone harmed by the story, even when they didn't have their names on the marquee. I sent a carefully worded note to a journalist I trusted in a small way, the kind who returns corrections and knows the difference between a hot take and a fact. Her name was Chantel. She'd once written about a data breach settlement without turning victims into clicks. I offered to meet on background with documentation, no money, no drama, just dates, audio, and the public filings Jocelyn had already mapped. Chantel asked for a coffee at a place with terrible chairs and excellent eavesdropping. I brought the air-gapped machine, printed logs, and a line in the sand. "No story that turns this into gossip." She said, "Deal," in a voice like clean copy, and took notes with a pencil. People who write with pencils respect erasers. I liked her immediately. She published 2 weeks later, not a splash, a sound, low, steady, undeniable. When safety is a line item, how a Santa Monica nonprofit repurposed intimacy funds for donor access. Names confirmed on the record by emails, the intimacy coordinator quoted by first name and job title, Nora's bland statement about evolving practices sounding like it had been sanded to remove meaning. The story didn't mention me, it didn't need to. It mentioned a 40-second reel that had forced a community to see itself and what that reveal had fleshed out. The theater responded the way institutions respond when someone has filed their paperwork in order. They convened a board subcommittee and scheduled a listening session. Nora went quiet. Raf posted a photo of a beach no one believed he'd walked on, captioned, "Taking time." The intimacy coordinator got 3 job offers from other companies in a week. I received a DM from S. Thank you for making room. I wrote back, you were brave before me. I meant it. Then came the sideways hit. I meant it. Then came the sideways hit. My company's HR pinged me for a quick check-in. The nonprofit had been in early talks with our sales team about an endpoint security pilot. Someone over there, an admin with a decent grasp of Google, a poor grasp of ethics, had forwarded an internal thread calling me the saboteur, CCing my corporate contact, brand, risk, conflict of interest, words that can mark your file even when nothing sticks. I sat in the glass room with a fern and an HR generalist who kept her voice soft as Velcro. We're not accusing you of anything, she said. We just want to ensure clear separation. I slid a printed one-pager across the table, dates, actions, the fact that I had not accessed any system I wasn't authorized to touch. Also, I added, I recuse myself from any prospect call with that nonprofit. The generalist nodded, grateful I'd done her job for her. My boss, Loop, yes, that's his nickname, it was a hackathon joke that stuck, walked me out and murmured, for what it's worth, the board chair tried to call me directly. For what it's worth, the board chair tried to call me directly. I told him we don't do back-channel threats in exchange for contracts. The way he said threats made me like him more. Threats don't always come as calls. 2 days later, my personal email received a login alert from a city I hadn't visited. I use unique passwords and passkeys. I don't reuse, I don't click, but somebody hoped I did. The recovery email they tried to add traced to an assistant at Raph's Foundation. Sloppy, childish. My fingers hovered over the keyboard wanting to be cruel. I forwarded the alert to the assistant with the subject line, your OPSEC is a hat with holes. Then I CC'd Loop and the legal alias and wrote, attaching for awareness, no breach, attempted account change blocked, recommending we document. Loop replied with a thumbs up emoji and the sentence, consider this logged. The assistant did not reply. 3 days later, Chantel's follow-up noted that an executive assistant at the foundation had departed to pursue other opportunities. People say these lines like prayers. They are doorways out of rooms you shouldn't have entered. I thought about letting it die there. Then the theater filed for a temporary restraining order against further projection of defamatory materials, an order written so carelessly that it read like a press release. We'll contest, Alondra said. Their filing is theater about theater. Still, I found myself in a courtroom where the air tasted like recycled fear and affidavits. Nora sat 2 rows ahead in a suit the color of care. Raph did not attend. Lila came in late, hair down, face forward. I stared at the back of a chair and breathed like I run slow in, hold, slow out. The judge was a woman with skeptical eyebrows and a voice that didn't rise above the facts. Counselor, she said to the theater's lawyer, if your client's concern is future harm, why is your evidence an event that has already occurred? He began to talk about reputations. She held up a hand. I asked a question about time. He flailed. Alondra rose and spoke in sentences that nested statute and story and never apologized for either. The motion died on the record, which is to say, it lived forever where it mattered. Outside, a stage manager I didn't know pressed a folded note into my palm and fled before I could ask who she was. In pencil, small and ferocious, we deserve better! Don't let them say you were cruel because you told the truth we needed! I didn't sleep that night, not because of the hearing, which had the neatness of a well-written function, because of the voicemail I listened to at 1003 a.m. from Lila. I can't find my way back, she said. No crying, no manipulation. A flat sentence spoken into the dark by someone who had discovered the world was bigger than her narrative. I lay on the floor by the balcony door and watched the street lamp paint the room in a color I couldn't name and decided not to call her back. Not because I wanted to hurt her, because I didn't know how to help without becoming furniture again. The next twist arrived wearing sincerity like a scarf. A board member from the theater asked for a private coffee, not to relitigate, to learn. We met at a cafe where the baristas pronounced cardamom like a sacrament. He was in his 50s, kindly eyes, a ring groove where a band had been. He said words like stewardship and mission. Then he offered me money to sign a non-disparagement. This is not an admission, he emphasized. It's a pathway forward, I asked. Forward for whom? He smiled the way donors do when they think they're being magnanimous. For everyone, he said, meaning the institution. I'll pass, I said. If your institution wants to move forward, pay the intimacy coordinator the budget you relabeled and put her name on a policy with teeth. He looked wounded, then relieved. People often are when you take the decision out of their hands. Later, Chantel texted me, hearing Ree. NDA offers. Told them no comment. Keep saying no. So I said no to big gestures and yes to small order. I rebuilt the balcony table I'd been meaning to fix since last summer. I took the AC filter out before the app nagged me twice. I swapped my coffee from dark roast to medium because bitterness is a nice note, but a poor baseline. And then Elise knocked again. Deposition, she said without hello, is next week. His lawyer wants to settle, but... She placed a small stack of printed screenshots on my table, a group chat between Nora, Raf, and a PR consultant about containing the husband. Words like unstable, disgruntled, hacker. A draft talking point. We are investigating a sophisticated cyber intrusion that manipulated our pre-show files. I laughed so hard I scared the bougainvillea. Sophisticated, I said. I labeled the file V3. Elise didn't laugh. They're going to float it anyway. People will hear the word hack and stop listening. I could have gone public again, tweeted the chat, sent it to every blogger who likes to see the word leak. Instead, I forwarded the screenshots to Chantel with a single line, if you use it, footnote, the theater's MacBook model and OS version. Facts make lies small, she wrote back. Bless you. And 3 days later published a neat little explainer titled, What Hacking Isn't, in which she walked readers through the difference between access and authorization without using my name. The theater's PR pivoted to lessons learned within a news cycle. There are fights worth having in public. There are others you win by making boredom louder than panic. Lila texted once after the article, I didn't know about the budget. I believed her. I also believed she didn't ask because asking would make the heat come from the right direction. She added, I said no to a director this week. Not boastful, not performative, a sentence she needed to put somewhere outside her body. I wrote back, good, then deleted good and wrote, I'm glad, she replied. Me too, we didn't add anything else. One afternoon, I found the man waiting by my building door, mid-30s, beard he didn't trust yet, hands in the pockets of a jacket too warm for the weather. Are you Ethan? He didn't trust yet, hands in the pockets of a jacket too warm for the weather. I nodded, shoulders half tensing for whatever comes after that kind of question. I worked carpentry at the theater, he said, not trying to take sides, just thanks. The booth kids have been told forever to eat it when donors want what they want. One of them cried after your thing, not because of the drama, because someone finally broke the script. He handed me a roll of gaffer tape, smiled like he'd made a joke out of a tool, and left. I put the tape in a drawer with batteries and glue and things that hold other things together. I wish the next twist was elegant. It wasn't. It was messy and came wrapped in a baby blue envelope with gold script, an invitation to a fundraising gala titled A Night of Renewal. The host committee included 4 names I recognized and 2 I hoped had other fonts in their lives. The program featured a panel called Art After Outrage, moderated by a columnist who likes the smell of his questions. Lila wasn't on the bill, but Nora was, and so was a board member who had offered me an NDA like a napkin at a barbecue. My thumb hovered over the RSVP like a moth. I clicked decline and donated to a different theater across town that paid their intimacy team on time and in full. Then I went for a run until my lungs argued me back into my body. Work shipped a product update and the feedback loop for once contained more thanks than complaints. Loop slapped my shoulder in the kitchen and said, Dinner at Ben's Friday? No crisis talk, just burnt ends and laughter. At dinner, Milo told a story about a date who wanted to split the check by the number of bites taken. Everyone screamed. I laughed hard enough to forget what my laugh had been doing for the last year. Coming home, I realized my apartment finally smelled like me, coffee, soap, the metal tang of the sea that sneaks in through every crack in every window in this city. No fig, no borrowed perfume. I stood in the doorway and thanked the stupid, stubborn place for holding me together while I found my pieces. A week later, the intimacy coordinator, S, whose full name I now knew because she'd started signing it, emailed, We're drafting a model policy. Would you look it over for gaps? I did. I marked language that could be weaseled and suggested clauses that connected budget to compliance. You're good at writing fences, she replied. Make sure the gate opens the right direction. I sat with that line like a stone that warmed in my hand. Fences and gates, ladders and handrails, all the metaphors we choose to make chaos feel like a system. Then the last thing I didn't expect happened, a message from Nora. Not a plea, not a defense, a paragraph that read like someone had removed half the adjectives from her vocabulary. We failed, she wrote. Not just you, our people. I cannot fix the past. I am trying to make our next room safer. A link followed, a PDF of a new policy that named intimacy work as non-negotiable and required donors to remain on the audience side of the fourth wall. Was it PR? Yes. Would it help? Also yes. I wrote back, "Write into it who has power to stop rehearsal if the policy breaks. Put that person on salary." She replied with a single word. I hadn't heard from her mouth without a stage in front of it. Done. I didn't tell anyone about her message. It didn't absolve her. It didn't absolve me. It sat beside all the other true things: the reel, the courtroom, the letter in the drawer, the omelet that held together, the run where I stopped narrating my feet. It joined them without needing to be the biggest thing in the room. The only time I saw Lila again where words had to be used was at the farmer's market on Main on a Sunday that smelled like peaches and sunscreen. She reached for a tomato I was already holding, and our fingers bumped. We both pulled back, we both laughed, we both apologized to the tomato in a reflex that made the vendor grin. "You look well," she said. "You too," I said, and meant it. We did not attempt the past tense or the future tense. We stood in the present, buying produce like citizens. She paid in cash. I paid with a tap. The world moved on without consulting either of us. It would be neat to say the story ends with a bow. That's not how endings behave. They arrive like tides, returning until they finally become background. Some nights I still wake at 2:13 and stand at the glass and let the city hum while my heart decides if it needs to race. Some mornings I run past the theater and don't glance at the poster box. Sometimes I do, and the faces are new and earnest and unbroken yet by reviews. I wish them good lighting and policy with teeth. I wish them the kind of boredom Linda wanted for me: steady, patient, the kind that makes stories into homes instead of into headlines. Once, on a run, a kid in a hoodie nearly collided with me chasing a dog that had decided leashes are metaphors. He shouted, "Sorry!" and kept sprinting. I watched them vanish toward the water and felt that odd rush that is neither joy nor sadness, but something like gratitude for motion itself. For the way bodies keep going, often messily, often beautifully, sometimes both at once. At home, I added a fourth line to the note I keep open on my phone. You can't audit your way into love. You can audit your way out of a lie. If someone calls consequence cruelty, leave their theater before the bow. Build rooms where the truth doesn't need a projector to be seen. That night, for the first time, I dreamed not about the 40 seconds, but about a stage I'll never stand on empty, waiting, lights at half, a chair in the middle. I sat in the chair and nobody asked me to perform. The dream ended there. I woke up rested, which is a kind of miracle you don't clap for because it scares it away. I made coffee, ground medium, not dark. I answered emails. I checked the logs because that is what I do. The alarms were quiet. The house held. The house held.